Let's cut across live to the Parliament now, where Finance Minister Arun Jaitley is speaking.
और अभी श्री प्रेमचंद्रन ने कहा कि जो टेक्निकल सप्लीमेंट्री है इसमें 1,03,000 में से वो लगभग 82,064 करोड़ की है, जो कि एफसीआई को दिया जा रहा है, फूड कॉरपोरेशन को। ये टेक्निकल एफसीआई इसलिए है कि ये पैसा एफसीआई को दिया जाएगा और फिर सरकार के पास वापस आ जाएगा। ये ग्रांट नहीं है। This is being paid to the FCI. It's a loan which we will be giving to the FCI and taking it back. और उसके पीछे मूल कारण ये है कि FCI कि क्योंकि वित्तीय स्थिति उनकी बहुत अच्छी नहीं है, उनको अगर बैंक से पैसा लेना पड़ता है तो FCI को 10.5% के करीब ब्याज देना पड़ेगा। अगर भारत सरकार लेती है या कोई राज्य सरकार लेती है तो जितने अमाउंट के ऊपर सरकारें उधार लेती हैं बाजार से, जिसको हम 10 ईयर बॉन्ड्स का G-Sec रेट मानते हैं, एक स्थिति थी कि सरकार को 9% से ऊपर कुछ वर्ष पहले तक लेना पड़ता था, वो 9% प्लस से नीचे आया और उसका कुछ संबंध जो फिस्कल डिसिप्लिन हम लोग फॉलो करते हैं और हमारी जो ग्रोथ है उसके साथ होता है। तो 9% प्लस से लाते लाते इस साल जब मैंने बजट पेश किया था तो उस दिन 7.95 के करीब था। महीना डेढ़ महीना पहले 7.3 था और अब शायद 7.15 के करीब है। So government borrowings are becoming cheaper because of the G-Sec rates. और अगर हम उस रेट पे लेकर एफसीआई को देते हैं तो लगभग एफसीआई 3-3.25% बचाती है, और क्योंकि उसकी अपनी माली स्थिति अच्छी नहीं है तो एफसीआई को फायदा है। तो इट्स अ टेक्निकल सप्लीमेंट्री इन द सेंस दैट वी आर एडवांसिंग द मनी which will carry a lesser rate of interest and we'll get our monies back. The cost of interest itself will be borne by the FCI, not by the government itself. And that is why this 82,064, the answer to Mr. Premchandra's questions, why are you giving so much money to the FCI? This is the response to it. It's a part of prudent fiscal planning. जो बाकी पैसा है, जो कैश आउटगो है, वो है 20,948 रुपए, 20,948। और इसमें जो एक बड़ा कंस्टिट्यूएंट है वो है मनरेगा का। अब मुझे लगता है कि कुछ बहस सदन में होती है, एक आध बार उसकी गलतफहमी हो सकती है। मिस्टर वेणुगोपाल रेज्ड दिस क्वेश्चन अगेन टुडे, इट हैज बीन रेज्ड इन द पास्ट। I think governments must be judged by how much do they actually spend on Manrega. From 2010-11, I have always been saying that there was a system of accounting which the UPA government had followed. Your budget allocations, the Bs were very high, and when the actual expenditure was seen, compared to the budget estimate, it used to be always lower. Year 2015-16 was the first year where the actual expenditures were slightly higher than the budget expenditures. And the system of accounting followed was, you can say we are spending so much on development, and then from the month of December start cutting that expenditure. Each ministry used to be told, now you start spending less. If you spend less, you don't grow. For example, you mentioned that 2010-11, we sanctioned 40,100. That's what you planned in the budget. What you spent was 35,840. Last year, and each year, the same story was repeated. 2011-12, 40,000 provided in the budget, spent 29,250. How are we concerned with your promising the moon and not being able to even achieve it halfway? 2015-16, it will disappoint you because it defeats your argument. Budget estimate, 34,700. Actual expenditure, 37,340. Now, this year in the budget you read out, I had said the highest ever is going to be spent, 38,500. How much will we be spent? In the supplementary, I am adding another 5,000. So it is being made 43,500. So please.
Actually, it is 60,000.
No, let him have, don't interfere, that is. Any.
So 43,500. And therefore this argument that you are cutting down on this expenditure actually needs now to be reconsidered by you. There are items on Pradhanmantri Bima Fasal Yojana, price stabilization fund for pulses, disaster relief, metro projects in Chennai and Delhi, telecommunication infrastructure in Gram Panchayats, strategic crude oil, assistance to Seychelles, development of the Chabar port for externally aided projects. Now that's the entire list of items on which it is proposed to spend these additional 23,000 odd, which is mentioned in the supplementary project, in the supplementary grants itself. Adhyaksh ji, इस वक्त क्योंकि जब सप्लीमेंट्री ग्रांट आती है तो स्वाभाविक है कि आर्थिक स्थिति देश की क्या है इसके ऊपर चर्चा हो जाए। तो एक तो वास्तविकता है कि पूरे विश्व में आज भी एक बहुत बड़ा चुनौतीपूर्ण माहौल बना हुआ है। हर बार जब आईएमएफ अपने एस्टिमेट्स देता है, आकलन देता है, तो वो ये आकलन से स्पष्ट होता है कि विश्व की जो विकास दर है आर्थिक, वो कम होने वाली है। और ये सब चुनौतियां हैं और इन चुनौतियों
नमस्कार, मैं हूं अश्विनी मिश्रा। ये था लोकसभा से सीधा प्रसारण, जहां पर वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली आम बजट 2016-2017 के लिए अनुदान की अनुपूरक मांगों पर चर्चा और मतदान पर लोकसभा में बयान दे रहे थे। वित्त मंत्री अरुण जेटली ने साफ तौर से ये कहा कि पूरे विश्व में आर्थिक स्तर पर चुनौती भरा माहौल है। इंटरनेशनल मॉनेटरी फंड यानी अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मुद्रा कोष के आकलन में हमेशा ये बताया जाता है कि विश्व भर में चुनौती की स्थितियां बनी हुई, आर्थिक चुनौती की स्थितियां में। और एक बार फिर चलते हैं लोकसभा, जहां पर वित्त मंत्री ये बयान दे रहे हैं।
25%, so which is a record low in the history of United Kingdom. So various unconventional policies are now being attempted by various governments because the global growth is slow and countries are not able to make up their mind and find an answer how long this situation is going to last. The situation is so serious. Any uncertainty in one part of the world impacts the other. The impact of Brexit is not going to be merely confined to the United Kingdom. It has its ripples all over the world. If trade shrinks, it shrinks for everybody. And that is one of the big challenges for India. Our trade was shrinking for almost 18-19 months. Last 1 or 2 months, there are some signs of revival of exports. Under this situation, what is the state where India today stands? In the first year, 2014-15, we grew by 7.2%. Last year, we grew by 7.6%. For 2 consecutive years, we were the fastest growing amongst the major economies in the world. And I hope this year also we retain that position.
No, please, let him finish. Oh, don't interfere like that. No, please. You continue. No. Adhir Ranjan, please take. After the speech is over, if it is necessary, you can ask before. Don't divert. Don't divert that. It will applicable to everyone.
The Central Statistical Organization, the CSO, functions fairly autonomously and professionally. It's the same body which has consistently dealt with India's economic data. So when they revise their data and they revise their methodology, they revise it with effect from 2011. And when they revise it with effect from 2011, 2 to 3 years of the UPA government also got revised. Now, so-called experts may raise their own questions, but when the IMF accepts this data, and that is probably the most credible organization as far as data of growth within the world are concerned, I think cavalier opinions expressed by others without going into the detailed methodologies itself may not carry much weight. Sir, but we also have our challenges. And our challenges are still grave. As I mentioned, one of the challenges that we faced was because the world trade was shrinking, our exports were also shrinking. And exports contribute to the GDP. But fortunately, the last 1 or 2 months have seen a revival. We'll have to wait for a little more period to see whether this revival data for the last 2 months is patchy or is it a part of a pattern. The global environment is unsupportive. And we have to accept that. These are adverse global situations. We also have a problem that 2 years in a row we had a very bad monsoon. And a bad monsoon impacts on demand, particularly rural demand, which can have a spiral effect on the economy itself, besides adversely impacting growth in agriculture. And one other challenge, Shri Mohammad Salim is not, he is not here. He's not here. It's a challenge which he raised, which relates to the public sector banks. Now, these public sector banks, because of whatever reasons, we've discussed them in this house even earlier, so I'm not going to repeat the argument. There are unacceptable levels of NPAs. Now, I don't want to reduce it to a debate that the loans were given during which government's period or otherwise, because ultimately these are commercial decisions banks take. So I am not going to get into an analysis of just relying on a blame game, because that won't solve the problem. One of the harsh realities is that some sectors have been adversely affected, and therefore those adversely impacted sectors have to be rectified. And I have repeatedly in this house also made a detailed statement only last week how the steps which we are taking in order to revive those sectors. The inability of the banks to support growth because of their own condition also has an impact on private sector investment. It is seeing some revival. The banks are actually showing operational profit. Operationally, they are all earning profit. But provisioning for those NPAs has to be done under the RBI norms. And therefore, once you add the provisioning, the profit then is not visible. In this environment, one important silver lining for India has been that oil prices have come to our rescue because we are the net buyers of oil. And being the net buyers of oil, we are able to save a certain amount of money because of oil. there are other positive factors. And amongst the positive factors besides oil, I think policy domain in India and policy changes which support growth, both at the level of the central government and the state governments, is changing and evolving very fast. Yesterday's unanimous vote in the other house on the GST itself is reflective of the fact. I think more important than the fact that the bill got through is the fact that it got through unanimously amongst the members present. And I think this indicates the fact that everybody seems to be concerned that we need to take steps which help the cause of the Indian economy. And if we look at what is happening in various states, irrespective of political differences between the parties, state after state is now competing to ask for investment. States are concentrating on infrastructure building. States are concentrating on social sector schemes. And therefore, this environment of cooperative federalism itself and also competitive federalism between the states, I think, is a positive development which is taking place. On the investment side, because we stand as one of the few islands of growth in the world, most countries are either going down or are maintaining a very modest level of growth. So the investors are wanting to put their money in countries which are growing, and India's needs for investment is very huge. We have the largest rural road building program in the world. We have the largest highway building program in the world. We need to build more ports. We have a railway modernization program. We have the largest number of airfields which we intend to create. Renewable energy. Now, these are all sectors, and we have been prudent enough to open various sectors of the economy. And opening those sectors to the economy means that investment itself becomes a starting point. And there are two important starting points for that investment in India which are evident today. One is an increased public investment. So between center and states, the capital investment in the country has increased significantly. And these capital project investments itself is leading to growth. The second, we have a significant increase as far as foreign direct investment is concerned. And more of it will come if we are able to conduct ourselves in a manner and increase our own credibility in the general body of investors, both within the country and outside. Sir, every body of investors that I meet within the country and outside, they are extremely happy with the kind of changes which have taken place. If we look at the last few months, the Aadhaar legislation, the bankruptcy law, and now hopefully the GST, these are very major reforms which have taken place in the Indian economy. The SARFAESI itself is a very important reform. These are a part of the reforms which are taking place. And in many parts of the world, it is unthinkable that a country would become so aspirational that it would start reforming and wanting to grow at this pace. Even conventional thinkers in various states have now realized that you need investment, you need infrastructure, you need industry, you need job creation, you need to invest in social sector, you need to invest in health, education, and so on. You can't say I'm concentrating on one and not the other. It will be incomplete completely. And therefore, in this environment, I think there is a big change which is taking place in the national mood. There are two concerns which are still expressed. Earlier, the concerns used to be, it's very difficult to do business in India. And they used to measure us by our very hopeless rankings, 142 out of 189 nations in the World Bank ranking on the ease of doing business. And suddenly you start having a more smoother system, where permissions are now coming, whether it is FIPB. 95% of foreign investment coming into India is now on the automatic route. So they don't have to wait in queue for years. Environmental clearances where they are to be given and where they are not to be given are becoming a matter of course. Most people concede that there is a huge dip as far as corruption is concerned at various levels. There is an attempt by governments, both central and states, to organize investor conferences to woo investments into their own states. So state governments are also trying to open single window clearances, etc. Last year we improved by 12 points. This year I am hoping we will improve by even more as far as the ease of doing business rankings are concerned. After all, investment will create jobs. Investments will lead to more economic activity, more revenue. But there are areas we are still to improve. For instance, in laws relating and permissions relating to land and construction, real estate, our ranking is 183 out of 189. It's a nightmare to get a land, to get its user changed and then get municipal permissions at various stages to construct. So the investor will always ask a question. The government policy in FDI is expanding. The chief minister has signed an MOU. FIPB clearance is very easy. Environmental clearance is very easy. But I spent the last 3 years with the municipality, not getting a permission. And therefore, these are areas where we require a very significant stage. And I'm sure states will also realize this, that these are local laws which are required to be changed, which should change in this particular course itself. And so with all this happening, I think there is a big silver lining that this year, after 2 consecutive years of bad monsoon, so far we are seeing a very good monsoon in the country itself. And the result of this good monsoon is that this will give rise to rural demand. ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में जो डिमांड है वो बढ़ेगी, प्रोडक्ट्स की डिमांड बढ़ती है. जैसे पिछले कुछ वर्षों में हम लोग देख रहे थे, कार की सेल बढ़ती थी लेकिन ट्रैक्टर और स्कूटर और मोटरसाइकिल की बढ़ नहीं रही थी, क्योंकि ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में उनकी खरीदारी ज़्यादा होती है. तो क्योंकि 2 साल बरसात अच्छी नहीं हुई तो लोगों के हाथ में वो पैसा नहीं था. लेकिन जब रूरल डिमांड बढ़ती है और सीमेंट, स्टील, ट्रैक्टर्स, 2 व्हीलर्स, इन सब की सेल बढ़ती है तो उसका उद्योग के ऊपर भी असर पड़ता है. तो इस वर्ष मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि केवल कृषि उत्पादन से ही जीडीपी को लाभ नहीं होगा, लेकिन किसान के हाथ में जो पैसा आएगा उससे जो उसकी खरीदारी की क्षमता बढ़ेगी, उससे भी अर्थव्यवस्था को लाभ होगा. और इस परिस्थिति में 2 बड़े प्रश्न पूछे जाते थे. जो पहले पूछे जाते थे कि भ्रष्टाचार बहुत है, ये वो अब प्रश्न ज्यादा नहीं आते. ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस को लेकर भी प्रश्न कम हुए हैं. लेकिन 2 प्रश्न, आप जीएसटी कब पारित करेंगे, कब लागू करेंगे, और आपके देश में बैंक्स की स्थिति क्या है. The whole world is concerned with these 2 questions. And I think one of these 2 questions we'll shortly find an answer to. And the second, we are struggling now to improve the situation. The government, therefore, from the budget resources also, we are funding our banks. We are empowering by law our banks to recover dues. And various other steps which are being taken with regard to improving the health of those sectors, we'll try and find that solution. And therefore, under the situation, we can remain one of the important centers of growth, even in a slowdown environment as far as the world is concerned. Taxation pranali, direct taxes, इस देश में एक माहौल बनाना पड़ेगा कि लोग टैक्सेस दें. पप्पू यादव जी बैठे हैं, इन्होंने 2 सुझाव दिए. अब इन पे तो निश्चित रूप से विचार हो सकता है, लेकिन टैक्स अबॉलिश करना तो कोई उत्तर नहीं होगा. वो दार्शनिक प्रश्न हैं जो आपने उठाए हैं, लेकिन टैक्सेशन की दर रीजनेबल रहे और टैक्स किस तरह से न दिया जाए इसका प्रयास करना, ये जो दो सोच एक देश में प्रचलित थी, उस सोच को भी बदलने का हम लोग प्रयास कर रहे हैं। मैं बेनामी कानून के दौर पारित करते वक्त ये बहस हुई है, इसलिए दोबारा उस चर्चा में नहीं जा रहा। कई ऐसे उद्योग हैं बिजली के क्षेत्र में जिनमें बहुत बड़े सुधार हुए हैं। सामाजिक सुरक्षा, सोशल सिक्योरिटी, फाइनेंशियल इंक्लूजन के माध्यम से हर व्यक्ति को बैंक के साथ जोड़ना, उसके अतिरिक्त सस्ते दर की बीमा योजनाएं लाना, सस्ते दर पर छोटे छोटे लोगों को मुद्रा योजना में ब्याज मिलना, पैसा मिलना, कृषि सिंचाई से लेकर क्रॉप इंश्योरेंस तक, कृषि बीमा तक ये योजना लागू करना, गरीब आदमी को गैस के चूल्हे के माध्यम से लाभ मिल सके। और इस दृष्टि में मैं ये कह दूं कि इस देश के गरीब और कमजोर वर्ग को सब्सिडी मिले, सहायता मिले, लेकिन जो लोग उसके लिए इंटाइटल्ड नहीं हैं उनको न मिले, तो आधार के माध्यम से भी यूपीए ने आरंभ किया था यूआईडी। उस वक्त सोच आरंभ हुई थी, बिल अलग प्रकार का था। हम में से बहुत लोगों को उसके संबंध में प्रश्न थे, लेकिन बाद में उसको परिवर्तित करके जो उसको सुधारने से, एवोल्यूशन से विचार बना है, उसका लाभ हुआ है। अब जहां पायलट प्रोजेक्ट केरोसिन का लिया गया, जहां लाखों लीटर जाता था, तो डुप्लीकेट एंटिटीज, अब उसका एलिमिनेशन होगा। कुकिंग गैस में उसका फायदा हुआ है और धीरे धीरे जैसे इसका फैलाव आएगा, स्कॉलरशिप्स में इसका लाभ हुआ है कि जो लोग इसको डिजर्व करते हैं उन तक पहुंचे, और जो बाकी पैसा सरकार के हाथ में आता है वो भी तो अन्य गरीब लोगों की सहायता के लिए इस्तेमाल होगा। तो ये सरकार की सहायता करने के जो कार्यक्रम है, सब्सिडी के जो कार्यक्रम है, उसका एक प्रकार से रैशनलाइजेशन है। एक बड़ा प्रश्न बार बार उठता है कि राज्यों के शेयर का क्या हुआ। अब आप जीडीपी के साथ लिंक करिए, अन्यथा उसको एब्सोल्यूट नंबर्स में देखिए। I have said this in the other house, Mr. Premchandran, but I would like to repeat in this house. The shares of the states is important, but we must all realize that India is a union of states. You have a union government and you have the states. That's the federal politics of India. India is not a confederation of states. India is not a confederation where you can either have no union or a weak union. The union government also needs funds. And therefore, any kind of economic thinking by which the union's funding itself becomes weak is also not in the interest of federal politics, of federal economics. Now today what is happening? States collect their own money, taxes. The central collects, I'm without the GST. Center collects the taxes. Center from its shares gives 42% to the states. Of the balance 58, for various schemes, either 100% or 60% we further give to the states. And then the union needs funds not only for salaries, after all the union also has debt. Union has to service that debt. this fiscal
You were listening to Union Finance Minister Arun Jaitley speaking in the Lok Sabha on the supplementary demands for grants in respect of Budget 2016-17. Finance Minister said that the silver lining in a dark cloud for the world economy is the fact that the crude oil prices have come down. He said that as far as India is concerned, FDI has increased, and we've seen the highest increase historically in India in this year. He also talked about a quantum leap in policy making and implementation at both the central level and the state level. He said that 7.6% was the GDP growth rate in the last financial year, and the government hopes that it will be able to maintain that GDP growth rate of 7.6% in the next financial year, or in this current financial year as well. And he talked about the fact that there are two issues of concern for India. One is the NPA of banks, and the other is the date of implementation of the GST. He said that these two issues are of concern to the entire world. He also talked about government's priorities, saying that what the government wants is that there should be a reasonable tax rate, as well as there should be a way to avoid tax evasion. So those are some of the highlights of Finance Minister's speech in the Lok Sabha.